not a day does not go by that we don't hear a statistic, a story, an article on LinkedIn somewhere about what is called the Great Resignation. And so a couple of interesting statistics. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, back in August of 2021, 4.3 million people, or almost 3% of the entire workforce in the United States, resigned. They left their jobs. Now, this is record-breaking, and you would think that during times of certainty and great economic growth, you would see maybe some of this type of activity. And it's common, but now with all of the different, what I'd call the tsunami of events that have impacted the workforce, this just seems like an unlikely number. So what I'd like to do now is I'd kind of like to turn to, let's start with you, Terry. What are your perceptions of this? Like, what are you seeing about the Great Resignation? You're on mute.
Favorite quote of the year or of the last 2 years. So a couple of different things I think that I'm seeing. I think one is, I've seen a couple of people describe this as such, but it seems a little bit like a mass musical chairs. And so some of this is everybody having stayed put for a year, hunkered down and felt sort of safe and grateful for their jobs while some people were losing their roles. And then as we kind of come out of the pandemic and into sort of a recovery, people are moving and some of this is just regrounding in values and regrounding and maybe geographically moving and changing. But I think too, what's happening a little bit is just a topsy-turvy labor market where what people are looking for may not be out there. And so I think we need to kind of rethink, organizations need to rethink how they're looking for talent and how they're sourcing talent and how they're thinking about talent.
Yeah. So let's say a little bit more about that. What do you mean what people are looking for is not out there?
So I think there's a little bit of a mismatch between the skills that employers are looking for and the skills that are out there. And I would say also some of that is geographic mismatch, experience mismatch. And so I think there's a little bit of a rethinking and more innovative approach that we need to take as we look at talent pools and look at how we're trying to connect them to the work, because the jobs are evolving and the jobs are changing. And so we need to have a more agile mindset in terms of how we're thinking about sourcing talent externally. There's actually different things happening depending on who you are. So some people are being recruited from all different areas and getting opportunities for sign-on bonuses and things like that based on their experience, while others are finding it very difficult to find roles. And so that's where you have these sort of mismatched labor market. And I think it will, over the long term, these kinds of things tend to equalize, but we can actually help that equalize faster by having a more agile mindset of how we're thinking about talent.
Yep. So one of the other statistics, and then I'm going to turn to Gretchen because a couple of things that people don't know. So Bullhorn is really a cutting edge recruitment technology. So I think Gretchen's going to have a lot of really interesting things to say about this and has been a leader in this conversation for many years. But one of the couple points that Terry raised is that what we've also seen, in addition to the Great Resignation conversation, is an exodus of talent from some of the major cities. So some of the source material where these stats come from is all in the back, so you don't have to worry about taking notes right now. But what we're seeing is cities with populations of over 250,000, so the bigger cities, have experienced a negative growth during the pandemic. And then, of course, engagement is at an all-time low, across the board. And so it's important to say that these trends had started prior to the global pandemic, but now they've just been escalated. So Gretchen, let's turn it to you. What has your experience been, again, as a leader in this conversation? Talk to us about the Great Resignation.
Yes, definitely. I think what you just said, Tracy, is right on. This isn't something that just happened because of the pandemic. Acceleration of this was triggered by the pandemic, certainly. And going back to Terry's point about agility, what I'm seeing is that there are organizations who have been preparing for this. And specifically, they're looking at their internal talent pool to understand what the level of engagement is, taking action on that, planning for their talent pipeline in the future, understanding some of the data that you just mentioned. There's a gap here in these big cities. How do we recruit from these smaller cities? Maybe broadening where and how they search. Like Terry said, also with the skills mismatch, you probably just can't search in X area anymore. It has to be bigger. And so some companies who have been taking those steps already are really thriving. And the Great Resignation is actually a really good thing for them. If they have people leaving, they're prepared, and they're also attracting a lot of the talent who are leaving other organizations, where organizations who have not been planning are in a worse spot. And obviously our goal here today on the call is to ensure everybody here is planning and taking action, so you're not caught, at the wrong end of that when these things continue to accelerate, which we know they will.
Sure. Now, is there any like a catalyst for change that has been kind of propelling people forward from your point of view? I mean, I know we have the Great Resignation and the pandemic, but like prior to that, was it like people looking at a technology, or is it just kind of all over the map in terms of what would motivate somebody to get going on this before they had to, I guess, is always what I like to know.
I think the answer always lies in the data. The data has been telling the story for a long time. And so organizations who are paying attention to what's really going on in the labor market, and there are great tools you can use to really understand pockets of the labor supply and demand pools in a market, or even in your internal organization, that's always there. It's about making it a priority to acquire and understand and take time to analyze the right data and what it means to you in order to take action.
Okay. So that was not an intentional question. Like I didn't pay Gretchen to answer that, but obviously with Harrison is a talent analytics firm. So you're preaching to people who say, start with the data. So yeah.